Hey, it's Monica with It's Just Sewing, and I love a great rag quilt. In fact, I think it's the gateway to learning how to truly quilt. But you know what's even easier than a traditional rag quilt? A strip rag quilt, and I'm going to teach you how to make this one today. I want to start off by talking about the sizing of each of the individual rows. And as a note, I have a very specific part of this with pictures on my blog. So if you get confused, you can head on over to itsjustsewing.com and check out that that blog post. But starting off, we know that each of the individual rows are going to be 44 inches wide. The top and the bottom rows are the exact same size and they're the exact same fabric. They're 7 inches in length from top to bottom, and they are, again, exactly the same on the top and the bottom, and you'll see this as a theme as it moves inward. Next, we're following it with a pink gentle wave fabric, and that is 5 inches in length, followed by our green wales, the green fabric with the pink wales, and that's 4 inches in length. Then we have our navy fabric with the white anchors, and that is 6 inches in length, followed by the pink fabric with the green and the navy wales, and that's 9 inches in length. Now, behind each of these individual strips, I've actually cut a piece of white flannel that's the exact same size and specifications. So you want to lay those right on top of each other. And to get ready to sew, what I'm going to do is start with my top row, the navy wales, and I'm going to lay that right on top of the pink waves, and those go right on top of the green fabric with the pink wales, and so on all the way down. So I'm just going to stack them one on top of the other, and then I'm going to head on over to my sewing machine and get ready to sew. So now that I have all of my rows stacked one on top of the other, I'm going to start by combining my rows. Now this is really easy and really fuss-free. I cannot stress this enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, so we're going to take the first 2 rows and start combining there. Now the most important thing to note is if you have a directional fabric, you want to really pay extra special attention to that. We have a directional fabric. Our top one does have a direction. So what I want to make sure is that my little wales are always facing the way that I want them to. And I'm going to lay that down. And then I've got my next ones, which is a pink. You really can't see it, but it's a really sweet pink brook or stream. So I'm going to lay that down. Now what I want to do is I want to combine them, but I want my flannel sides touching, not my pretty sides. So keep that in mind, all right? It seems counterintuitive, but bear with me because that is what makes it a rag quilt rather than a regular quilt. So we're going to go ahead and combine those flannels touching and try as best you can to get the cottons to also line up at the same point. And then we're going to go ahead and start pinning them all the way down. Now that I have the row entirely pinned, what I want to do just as a final checkpoint is just open it up, knowing my seam is going to be on the outside, just to check and see if my direction is facing the way that I want it to. And it is. So now I'm going to hop on over to my sewing machine, and I am going to sew the length of this entire row, and I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and at the end just a couple of times, and I'm going to use about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now that my first row is done, I'm going to go ahead and attach the next row to the pink fabric and start sewing that one and continue row by row. And that's my final row. So let's take a peek. This is a big quilt, and I absolutely love how the difference in the sizes of the individual strips really adds movement and interest throughout the quilt. Now we're not done yet. We have a little bit more to do. First things first is we're going to size up the sides. As you can see, they definitely need it, and then we're going to talk about our homework for the evening. So as you can see, I brought out my rotary mat, my ruler, as well as my rotary cutter. If you don't have these at home, you can always use a piece of chalk and a ruler and a pair of scissors. So don't overthink this. It's just nice when you have all of these little devices. So what I'm going to do is, you can see I already did this, but I went ahead and folded my quilt in half, and I'm pressing it so it's nice and flush and like getting all those wrinkles out. And then what I'm going to do is line up my edge of the fabric down here, my fold line, with the edge of the rotary mat, and just kind of keep it as on the line as possible. Again, this is really not meant to be stressful, so we're just doing the best that we can. It will all look great in the end. So what I'm going to do is come on over here, and I find the point where the fabric's going the furthest in, just right about there, and I am going to just lop off the excess, just like this. I'm going through lots of layers, so I'm going to give it one more little cut. And then I'm going to bring the fabric down just a little so I can get this edge. Again, keep this all lined up. That'll keep it in the same line, uniform line. Okay? All right. Now, same thing on the other side. So my homework tonight is going to be to sew along the perimeter of the quilt, just to lock in all of these stitches as well as the top and the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fringe all of my edges that are my raw edges that are coming up. I'm going to fringe them. I'm going to show you how I do this. So I'll fold it in half just like that, and then I take my scissors and I just give it a nice little clip all the way down. It takes a little time, but you can do it while you're watching the TV or hanging out or listening to music or a podcast. And the biggest thing is you just want to make sure you do not cut the stitch line, and that your fringes look nice and consistent. I would say probably about a quarter to a half an inch apart from one another is totally adequate. So you're going to go ahead and do that all the way along each of these frayed rows as well as the entire perimeter. Then you're going to wash it and dry it just like you normally would, just on a normal cycle. And after that, your quilt is done. So my final piece of advice, and I get asked this question all the time, is when you are sewing the perimeter of your quilt, should you go straight? Should you just power over those frayed edges that are coming out, or should you open them up and distribute the weight on either side? And the answer is, honestly, it does not matter, because ultimately I'm going to take my pair of scissors and I'm going to come in here, whether it's opened or tamped to one side, and I'm going to cut those bits of fabric so that the frayed edge is going to stand straight up. So as you can see, it's not really going to matter much if I do it to an open seam or a seam that goes off to one side. And ultimately, once it's washed, it's all going to look pretty much the same. So I say whatever is easiest is the one that you should do.